You guys are in a crisis. I'm on my way.
Ingenious Industries, founded by a simple tinker building vehicles for his village. This family business has ballooned into an aviation empire. And much of its success hangs on the designs of one person. The youngest Tantius daughter, Stelle. An engineering prodigy with a passion for making things better. But the rest of the family had a passion for something else. Wealth at any cost, without concern for who it harmed. One day, Stelle built a telescope to see what she was never meant to see. The truth. Her creations had become weapons, sold to the highest bidder and used to exploit the vulnerable. On that day, Stelle made a choice. She would not let her talents be sold to tyrants. She would give them to the helpless, to help them fight back. She would repair the damage her family did to the world and leave it better than before. Upgraded and calibrated. With every tool in her kit, Stelle will engineer a new life in the wild workshop of the Bazaar.
Hey, it's the Rouge, and today we'll be having a lore talk about the Bazaar, a game that made its debut on Steam on August the 13th. Standing in a place between Slay the Spire and Auto Battlers, it differentiates itself from others thanks to the coherent and currently expanding lore around its world, taking the definition of its own world from their website. Set in a vibrant, ever-changing galactic marketplace, players assume the role of a merchant, drafting and upgrading otherworldly items and skills to assemble the ultimate board. Showcase your collection against a series of opponents in our asynchronous PvP. Essentially, it makes the Bazaar a fantasy realm located at the intersection of endless possibilities. Our latest hero, Stelle, brought with her more lore, and we will attempt to break her aesthetic and character design down to what I hope will be an analysis that will make justice to her amazing themes and the way they are portrayed. Taking into account the lore video that we watched earlier, the simplicity and generous nature of Stelle is indicated in her design through the difference between her apparel and those worn by her family. Where the other Tantius chose to encumber themselves in gold, ostensive jewelry, and evocate a sense of bourgeoisie tending to nobility, Stelle is drawn to parallel her grandfather, the simple tinkerer that wanted to help his comrades by building vehicles. In a family that chose to profit from the booming of their business, she wears practical clothing akin to the ones worn by mechanics. The jumpsuit, gloves, and tools point out to her working nature, even though she is the heiress to an empire. Her long and free hair, along with the aviation goggles, express a desire of flight and freedom, as opposed to the very organized and polished appearance of a sister. Stelle draws inspirations in the attire belonging to her grandfather, as he also wore goggles, a jumpsuit, and had an overall working-class aesthetic, which tells to us, the viewers, that she is morally close to her ancestor. Her family, on the other hand, by straying not only in purpose but also in the general aspect of their clothing, indicate that they have ruptured with the original family goal. Profit has overthrown benevolence for them. Their accessories aren't tools, they are objects of luxury, crowns, gold, and embellishments, all messages of self-centrism and money-driven interests. Stelle is physically the only one still attached to the aircraft and engineering as art forms and not businesses. Expanding on the items wielded by the family members, it is interesting that where Stelle and her grandfather both wield tools, that is a drill and a wrench, both significant of what is needed to invent on their respective times, Stelle's sister has a cigarette holder. The object in itself, along with the clear steampunk art that surrounds the Tantius industries, evoke the prohibition aesthetic and more specifically the rise of the bourgeoisie at the time, taking the place of the overthrown nobility as the economic and social power. Not so coincidentally, it was after the Industrial Revolution that arms dealing, her family's business, took its toll and allowed for war profit. Furthermore, and to go back to Stelle's sister, she reads as the exact opposite of our hero. She's slim, tall, and organized. She symbolizes internalized oppression, having literally taken it upon herself by wearing both the military-coded dress and obvious villainous shoulder pads, as well as tying her hair strictly, metaphorically showing a notion of both control and imprisonment wrapped in gold. The powerful family scene where her parents appear as obnubilated by the gold chest that is presented to them indicates that she is not just perpetuating a system from where she is captive, for such system of capitalizing from others' suffering is of her own invention. We know from the trailer that Stelle is the one locked in the Tantius Tower, working for what she thinks is the greater good, only to have her invention sold in biddings. And it's probably her sister that planned the entire thing. Going back to the cigarette holder, we have to know that cigarettes and smoke are usually reflective of one's intellectual nature. That is why pretentious philosophers are always depicted partaking in the tobacco, if not other substances, consumption. It is also the reason that in polos and in the noir genre, the archetype of the femme fatale, be it a black widow or a manipulative woman, is often seen smoking, the smoke being both the illusion and the creation of said illusion. Stelle's sister is certainly the head of her family, as her parents appear as mere shadows focused on gold. She has her eyes on their golden goose, that is Stelle. If this explanation did not convince you, in-game she has a very strong board, constructed with careful thought as well as expressing that it's the shareholders that are worried about Stelle and not her. She actually tells Stelle that she has always been a brat, once again confirming that not only is her older sister the head of the company, but that Stelle has always been seen as a nuisance, a difficult investment in the great scheme of Tantius Industries. The story of Stelle encompasses with these family affairs and power dynamics something that isn't without remembering the Princess Tales. Think about it. Stelle is locked in a tower kept in the shadows where she is exploited for her talent by her evil relatives. Unlike those tales, she doesn't need any prince to get out of there. It is her own invention, the telescope, that allows her to gain insight into the situation, and without hesitating she stops the ongoing bombing and decides to take off to the Bazaar. Showing both good heart and the desire of redemption, she takes control of her life and settles on a quest for mending. Visually, it is her round shapes and unusual beauty that make her a convincing and intriguing character. Prior to her release and before watching the lore video, I was a bit underwhelmed by her looks. But now with the story and her lore put it in context with the visual design, the quest of simplicity appears to me as brilliantly done. She embodies an idea of a rebellious youth that has the force to stand against their elders and actually seeks mending the world they have created. Stelle is a visual depiction of talent used for good, and visually a lesson of less is more.
Happiness is a butterfly. Try to catch it like every night. It escapes from my hands into your
into a line of master alchemists, young Mak took nothing seriously. Least of all, the family business. But one tragic night, he would pay the price for his reckless ways. Having lost everyone he loved, Mak turned his back on the world and took a terrible vow. He would uncover the forbidden secret of alchemy, the power over death itself. He would give his whole life to the search, and if one life was not enough, he would live as many as it took to atone for his mistake. He would bring his family back. After centuries of study, he was getting close. Every clue pointed in one direction. He would find the formula of life in the twisting streets of the Bazaar.
Mak, on the other hand, is the stellar opposite of a bright sunshine engineer. His lore video has all the codes of a villainous backstory, and with his essence being one of mysteries and alchemy, Mak is an example of morality as made ambiguous. Through neglecting his duties in the family shop and abusing socialite pleasures, he causes the death of the ones he loved. From there, the young alchemist takes the road of the wizard apprentice, a philosophical concept often used to warn mankind about the dangers of reckless innovation. François Rabelais in Gargantua writes that science without conscience is but the ruin of the soul, a quote that would lead to metaphysical discussions surrounding experiments and medical procedures in the 15th century. Our alchemist seems to physically represent the excess of transhumanism. Because of his obsession towards arcane knowledge and striving to bring back the dead to life, Mak would go to make himself immortal, even though he presents himself as a man in his prime, as shown by his glorious beard and overall handsome appearance. We learn not only that he is 500 years old, but there is a clear reference to Dorian Gray in the form of the Memento Mori card. For those who don't know the picture of Dorian Gray, a novel by Sir Oscar Wilde from 1890, it is the story of a London's dandy, Dorian Gray, who wishes that his portrait would age instead of him, so he can keep his beauty throughout his entire life. Of course, things don't go as planned, and if the beginning of the events gave him great satisfaction, Dorian Gray would slowly lose all human characteristics, and even his own soul, as his painting would grow uglier by the day. He traps his soul inside a painting and leaves an eternally young projection of himself in reality. Therefore, Mak is a character which design is then alluring. He, unlike Stelle, is not about what you see, but about the occult, the hidden, and the what's not shown. This is symbolized by his overall attire being a nod to Middle Eastern traditional clothing, made fashionably Bazarian, but also by the fact that despite having an advantageous look, he decides to deliberately hide himself in textiles. What is important about Mak's appearance are the potions and the scrolls, his very own fascination and dependence on the occult knowledge to live, as well as it being its ultimate goal, the greatest of all alchemies, that is, turning death into life. His cane is a fun nod to the fact that he is indeed an old man, but it also symbolizes the constant crutch and reliance on magic to live. After all, the loss of his relatives is by his own doing, and it is the only thing that keeps driving him. Though he is an immortal being, Mak seems to have stopped living the day he lost his family. Though his goals are justifiable, The means that Mak goes to in order to make them happen are what make him a unique take on a playable character. Depending on how you view morality, he could be seen as an anti-hero or a villain, being associated with poison represented by the green in his attire, as well as snakes going as far as wearing a coif reminiscent of a king cobra's collar. Mak's interactions with the Bazaar and its lore is often cold-hearted, sometimes even frightening. As such, besides being absolutely fabulous and having an undeniable and questionable passion for science, Mak is my favorite character out of the game. Also, Tempo, why are you banning people for no reason? That's not something you should do.
You, you, you. You're cool. You. I'm out.